Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Luna Station watching the technicians work at their screens. The massive communication array outside the station hummed with power as it picked up signals from across the galaxy. Most days were quiet, but today was different. Today they had received something that changed everything. The signal had arrived 3 hours ago, and every person on the station was working to understand it. The transmission came from far away in space, from a star system called Kepler 442. It was over 1,200 light-years from Earth, which meant it had taken that long just to reach them. What made it special was that it was clearly not human. Lieutenant Lisa Martinez walked up to Morrison with a datapad in her hands. Her face was serious and her voice was tight with worry. She had been working on the signal since it first came, and now she had answers that Morrison needed to hear. "Sir, we have translated most of the message now. It is definitely from aliens and they are asking for help. The Universal Translator is still working on some parts, but the emotion is very clear. They are terrified of something they call the Devourers." Morrison took the datapad and read through the information. The signal was weak and broken in places, but the meaning was clear enough. An entire civilization was crying out for help against an enemy that was destroying everything they had built. The message repeated over and over like a desperate prayer sent into the darkness of space. Captain Ryan Blake stepped closer to look at the tactical display that showed the location of the signal. Blake commanded the UES Vengeance, which was one of the most powerful ships in the human fleet. He was a veteran of many battles, and his experience showed in the way he studied the data. "What do we know about these Devourers they mention? Have we ever heard of them before?" Martinez shook her head and pulled up more information on her pad. The details were disturbing and painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything humans had ever faced before. The aliens sending the message had provided what information they could about their attackers. The preliminary analysis suggests they are some kind of hive mind species that consumes entire star systems. The aliens who sent this call themselves the Zilani, and they say they are the last survivors of what used to be a great confederation of worlds. Everything else has been destroyed or consumed. Morrison felt his jaw tighten as he read more of the translated message. The Zilani described watching their worlds burn as massive biomechanical ships stripped away everything valuable. They talked about billions of their people dying as the Devourers fed on their technology and resources. It was genocide on a scale that was hard to imagine. The irony of the situation was not lost on Morrison. Just 3 months ago, the Galactic Council had rejected humanity's application for membership in their organization. They had called Earth a dangerous death world and said that humans were too violent and aggressive for civilized space. The Council species viewed humans as primitive barbarians who solved problems with violence instead of diplomacy. Now, those same civilized species were nowhere to be found when real danger threatened innocent lives. The Zilani message had been broadcasting for weeks, according to the timestamp, but no one had answered their call for help. The advanced and peaceful council members had apparently decided that discretion was better than valor when faced with a truly dangerous enemy. "Get me Director Kate Sullivan at the Defense Ministry immediately. Tell her this is Priority Alpha and I need to speak with her right now." Martinez nodded and began working at her communication console to establish the connection. Morrison knew that Sullivan would want to hear about this personally. The defense director had been pushing for humanity to take a more active role in galactic affairs ever since the council rejection. This might be exactly the opportunity she had been waiting for. While they waited for the connection, Morrison studied the star charts showing the location of the Kepler 442 system. It was far from Earth, but not impossibly so for human ships with their latest quantum drive technology. The journey would take weeks, but it could be done if they were willing to commit significant resources to the mission. Blake looked at the tactical information and ran calculations in his head about what kind of force would be needed for such a mission. The Zilani had described the Devourer fleet as massive, with hundreds of ships, each over 10 kilometers long. Fighting such an enemy would require everything humanity could bring to bear. "Sir, do we even know if these Zilani are telling The truth about what is happening out there. This could be some kind of trap or deception. Morrison considered the question carefully. It was always possible that the signal was false or that they were being manipulated somehow. However, the emotion in the Zilani transmission seemed genuine, and the technical details they provided about the Devourers were consistent throughout their message. More importantly, the signal had been broadcasting openly for weeks, which suggested desperation rather than careful planning. The analysis team has been checking the signal for signs of deception, and they have found nothing suspicious. The Zilani seem to be exactly what they claim to be, which is a dying civilization asking for help from anyone who will listen. The communication system chimed, and Director Sullivan appeared on the main screen. She was in her office at the Defense Ministry, and her expression was serious as she listened to Morrison's report about the alien distress signal. Sullivan had built her career on understanding threats to human security, and she immediately grasped the implications of what they had discovered. Jake, are you telling me that we have received a genuine distress call from aliens who are being exterminated by some kind of hive mind species? That is exactly what I am telling you, Kate. The Zilani are asking for military assistance against an enemy called the Devourers, who apparently consume entire star systems. Every analysis we have done suggests that this is a legitimate cry for help. Sullivan was quiet for a moment as she considered the situation. Morrison could see her weighing the political and military implications of responding to such a call. Humanity had been rejected by the galactic community, but now they had a chance to prove their worth by helping those in need. What kind of response time are we looking at if we decide to act? Blake stepped forward to answer the question. With our fastest ships and maximum burn, we could reach the Kepler 442 system in approximately 3 weeks. However, we would need to assemble a significant battle group to have any chance against the enemy force described in the Zilani message. Sullivan nodded slowly as she made her decision. Morrison could see the determination growing in her eyes as she realized what this opportunity meant for humanity. They could show the galaxy that humans were more than just violent primitives from a death world. Gentlemen, it looks like the civilized species need some death world barbarians after all. I am authorizing Operation Distant Thunder. We are going to answer that call for help. Within 6 hours of Director Sullivan's authorization, every major human military installation across the solar system was buzzing with activity. The response was swift and decisive as humanity, prepared to answer the call for help that no other species had been willing to answer. Ship crews were recalled from leave and supply chains activated to support what would become the largest military operation in human history. At Terra Command on Earth, the Joint Chiefs of Staff gathered in the main briefing room. Director Sullivan stood before the massive holographic display that showed the positions of human ships throughout the solar system. Her voice was steady and confident as she addressed the assembled military leaders who would make Operation Distant Thunder possible. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been given an opportunity to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. The Galactic Council rejected us because they thought we were too violent and primitive for their civilized society. Now we will prove that sometimes the galaxy needs exactly the kind of people they tried to keep out. Fleet Admiral Chris Parker stepped forward to take operational command of the mission. Parker was a veteran of the asteroid wars and had commanded the largest human battle groups ever assembled. His reputation for tactical brilliance and aggressive leadership made him the perfect choice to lead humanity's response to the alien threat. The fleet composition will be built around our newest and most powerful ships. We are taking the Dreadnoughts, USS Thunder UES Lightning Strike, and UES Righteous Fury as our primary heavy hitters. These ships carry the most advanced weapons humanity has ever built, and they will form the backbone of our attack force. The holographic display updated to show the massive warships as they were highlighted. Each dreadnought was over 800 meters long and carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Their quantum torpedo tubes and plasma cannon arrays represented the cutting edge of human military technology, developed through decades of conflict and innovation. Supporting the Dreadnoughts, we will have 47 destroyers, 30 cruisers, and our most experimental weapons platform, the UES Apocalypse. This ship carries prototype weapons that have never been tested in actual combat, but our scientists believe they may be effective against the biomechanical nature of the Devourer ships. Captain Amy Rodriguez raised her hand to speak. She commanded the stealth reconnaissance ship UES Shadow, which was equipped with the latest quantum drives and cloaking technology. Her ship would play a crucial role in gathering intelligence about the enemy before the main battle group arrived. Admiral, what is our intelligence situation regarding the target system? Do we know anything about Devourer capabilities beyond what the Zilani have told us in their distress signal? Parker nodded and brought up additional data on the display. The information was limited, but what they had suggested an enemy unlike anything humanity had previously encountered. The Devourers appeared to be part biological and part mechanical, with ships that could adapt and evolve during combat. Captain Rodriguez, your ship will depart immediately with a small advanced scout force. You will reach the Kepler 442 system approximately 1 week before the main battle group arrives. Your mission is to gather detailed intelligence on enemy capabilities and positions while remaining undetected. The success of our mission may depend on the information you provide. Rodriguez nodded her understanding. The UES Shadow had been designed specifically for deep space reconnaissance missions, and her crew was trained in stealth operations behind enemy lines. They would need to get close enough to study the Devourers without being detected, which would require all of their skill and technology. On the surface of Earth at the Orbital Launch Facility, Colonel Danny Walsh supervised the loading of equipment for the orbital drop Marines. These were not ordinary soldiers, but veterans of humanity's most brutal conflicts who had been trained specifically for zero-gravity combat and planetary assault operations. They wore powered armor that allowed them to fight in vacuum, and their weapons were designed to function in any environment. "Listen up, Marines," Walsh addressed his assembled troops as they prepared their equipment. "We are not just representing Earth on this mission. We are showing the entire galaxy what humans do when innocent people ask for help. The aliens out there think we are primitive barbarians who solve everything with violence. Maybe they are, right? But sometimes violence is exactly what the situation requires." The Marines responded with enthusiasm as they loaded their gear onto the transport ships. Each soldier carried enough equipment to survive and fight in hostile environments for weeks without resupply. Their training had prepared them for combat in conditions that would kill most other species, but humans had evolved on a world that constantly tried to eliminate them. Back in space, the massive shipyards around Mars worked around the clock to prepare the fleet for departure. Supply ships loaded ammunition, food, and spare parts, while technicians made final adjustments to weapon systems. The quantum drives that would carry the fleet across 1,200 light-years of space were tested and retested to ensure they would function properly. Captain Blake stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the preparations through the main viewing screen. His ship had been upgraded with new weapons specifically for this mission, including experimental railguns that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The kinetic energy released by such weapons would be devastating to any target they hit. "Sir, we are receiving updates from the other ships in the battle group. All vessels report ready for departure within 18 hours. Blake nodded as he reviewed the tactical information on his command screens. The fleet they were assembling represented nearly 70% of humanity's total military strength. If they failed in this mission, Earth would be left vulnerable to any threats that might emerge while their forces were away. Admiral Parker appeared on the communications screen, addressing all ship captains simultaneously. His expression was serious but confident as he outlined the final details of their mission timeline and objectives. "The journey to Kepler 442 will take us 3 weeks at maximum burn using our quantum drive systems. We will arrive in formation and immediately assess the tactical situation. Our primary objective is to eliminate the Devourer threat and provide assistance to any surviving Zilani forces. Secondary objectives include gathering intelligence about Devourer technology and capabilities for future reference. Parker paused to look directly at each captain through the video connection. I want everyone to understand what we are attempting. Here, we are traveling further from Earth than any human military force has ever gone to fight an enemy we know almost nothing about. The species we are trying to help have never seen humans before and do not know what we are capable of. We will show them and the galaxy that when someone sends a distress call, humans answer. The communication ended and the final preparations began. Within hours, the largest battle fleet in human history would depart for the stars carrying with it the hopes and determination of an entire species ready to prove their worth. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system and immediately encountered a scene of complete devastation. Where planets should have been orbiting the star, there were only asteroid belts filled with debris that sparkled with the remains of what had once been mighty civilizations. The destruction was so complete that it was difficult to believe anything could have survived the attack. Admiral Parker stood on the bridge of his flagship, UES Thunder, studying the tactical displays that showed the current state of the system. The sensors were picking up massive energy signatures near the central star where something was actively feeding on the solar plasma. The readings were unlike anything in human databases and suggested technology that was both alien and terrifying. Captain Rodriguez and her stealth ship UES Shadow had arrived in the system 5 days earlier under full cloak to gather intelligence about the enemy. Her report had been transmitted to the fleet just before they arrived, and the information was disturbing beyond anything they had expected to encounter. Admiral, the Devourers are unlike anything we have in our military databases. Each ship appears to be part biological and part mechanical, with hulls that pulse and shift like living tissue. The largest vessels are approximately 15 kilometers in length, and they are literally consuming the star itself to fuel their operations. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system from her hidden position deeper in the system. Her ship remained cloaked, but she was close enough to the enemy to provide detailed observations about their capabilities and behavior patterns. The biomechanical nature of their ships seems to allow them to repair damage very quickly. I observed one vessel that had been damaged in what appeared to be a collision with debris. Within hours, the hull had completely regenerated, and the ship was functioning normally again. Parker absorbed this information while studying the enemy positions on his tactical display. The Devourer fleet numbered in the hundreds, with ships of various sizes arranged in what appeared to be feeding formations around the star. Smaller vessels moved between the larger ones in patterns that suggested some kind of hive mind coordination. Captain, what is the status of the Zolani survivors? Were you able to locate them? Yes, sir, they are hiding in the asteroid field at the outer edge of the system. Their remaining ships are beautiful, but clearly not designed for military operations. The hulls are smooth and elegant with what appears to be crystal-based technology, but they have virtually no armor or weapon systems. The contrast between human and Zolani ship design philosophy was immediately apparent. Where human vessels were angular and heavily armored with obvious weapon emplacements, the alien ships looked more like works of art than instruments of war. It was clear that the Zolani had been a peaceful species focused on exploration and trade, rather than military conquest. How many Zolani ships are left? Approximately 30 vessels of various sizes. Their commander tells me they started with over 400 ships when the Devourers first arrived. They have lost 80% of their fleet trying to fight an enemy they were never equipped to handle. Captain Blake, aboard the UES Vengeance, was analyzing the weapons data from Rodriguez's reconnaissance mission. The information about Devourer defensive capabilities was particularly concerning and would require significant changes to their planned attack strategy. So the preliminary scans show that Devourer ships have some kind of adaptive armor system. When the Zolani attacked with energy weapons, the enemy hulls began to adapt and become resistant to those specific frequencies. Each subsequent attack became less effective as the ships learned to defend against whatever was used against them. Parker considered this information carefully. Adaptive defenses were something human military doctrine had theoretical countermeasures for, but they had never faced such technology in actual combat. The ability of enemy ships to learn and adapt during battle would make conventional tactics much less effective. That explains why the Zelani were so thoroughly defeated despite having numerical superiority at the beginning of the conflict. Their ships all used similar energy-based weapon systems, so once the Devourers adapted to those frequencies, the aliens had no way to cause significant damage. Dr. Helen Carter, the fleet's first contact protocol specialist, had been working to establish communication with the surviving Zelani forces. Her linguistic analysis programs had been processing their language patterns and cultural references to build a proper translation matrix for meaningful dialogue. Admiral, I have successfully established contact with the Zelani commander. He identifies himself as High Navigator Celeste, and he is requesting permission to communicate directly with our fleet leadership. Parker nodded his approval, and within moments the main viewing screen displayed the image of an alien unlike anything humans had encountered before. High Navigator Celeste appeared to be humanoid, but with elongated features and skin that had a subtle crystalline quality. His eyes were large and expressive, and they showed a mixture of hope and desperation that needed no translation. "You came," Scylla said through the translation system, and his voice carried emotional weight that transcended species barriers. "We broadcast our distress call for many cycles, but no one answered. The Council species all fled or went into hiding when they heard about the Devourers. We did not expect anyone to actually respond to our plea for help." Parker stepped forward to address the alien commander directly. His voice was steady and confident as he spoke for all of humanity in this first contact between their species. "We are humans from the planet Earth, and when someone sends a distress call, we answer it. That is what we do, regardless of who is asking for help or how dangerous the situation might be." Scylla seemed puzzled by this response, and he asked for clarification about human motivations. "But what do you gain from helping us?" "We have nothing to offer you in return, and fighting the Devourers will put your own people at great risk." "Why would you travel so far to aid strangers?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Parker replied simply. "The Devourers are destroying innocent civilizations, and someone needs to stop them. If we do not help you today, then tomorrow they might threaten our own people or others who cannot defend themselves." The concept seemed difficult for Celis to understand, coming from a species that had been rejected by the Galactic Council for being too aggressive and violent. The idea that the same qualities that made humans seem dangerous could also make them willing to risk everything to help strangers was apparently revolutionary. The Council said, "Your species was too primitive and violent for civilized space. They warned us that humans were dangerous and unpredictable." Parker smiled grimly as he prepared to show the galaxy exactly what humans were capable of when properly motivated. "High Navigator, the Council was right about one thing. We are very dangerous. The question is whether you want that danger pointed at the Devourers or somewhere else." The human fleet struck at the Devourer swarm exactly 6 hours after their arrival in the system. Admiral Parker had spent those precious hours analyzing enemy positions and finalizing attack plans that would give humanity the best chance of victory against an opponent that outnumbered them 3-1. The element of surprise would be crucial since the Devourers had never encountered human technology or tactics before. Parker divided his forces into 3 separate attack groups, each targeting a different section of the enemy formation. The plan was designed to prevent the Devourers from concentrating their full strength against any single human force while maximizing the damage that could be inflicted in the opening moments of combat. Captain Blake led the primary assault group, with the heavy dreadnoughts use Thunder UES Lightning Strike and UES Righteous Fury supported by 20 destroyers. Their mission was to punch directly through the center of the Devourer formation and cause as much destruction as possible while the enemy was still adapting to human weapons technology. The first salvo from the human fleet lit up the darkness of space as quantum torpedoes and plasma cannons unleashed their devastating power against the biomechanical enemy ships. The initial results were spectacular as Devour vessels that had never encountered such weapons took massive damage from the concentrated firepower. Direct hits on multiple targets, reported the weapons officer aboard UES Thunder. Enemy ships are showing significant structural damage and several smaller vessels have been completely destroyed. Blake felt a moment of satisfaction as he watched. The tactical display showed the effects of their opening attack. However, his experience in combat warned him that initial success often led to overconfidence, and he remained focused on enemy response patterns rather than celebrating early victories. The Devourers reacted exactly as intelligence reports had predicted. Within minutes of the first human attack, the biomechanical ships began adapting their hull configurations to better resist the energy frequencies being used against them. The adaptive armor technology that had defeated the Zelani started to reduce the effectiveness of human weapons. Sir, our plasma cannons are showing decreased damage output against the same target types. The enemy hulls are adapting to our energy signatures faster than we anticipated. Blake had expected this development and immediately implemented the second phase of the attack plan. All ships switched to kinetic weapons immediately. Prepare to launch railgun projectiles on my command. The human fleet began firing solid tungsten projectiles accelerated to 20% of light speed, using magnetic railgun technology. These kinetic kill vehicles carried no energy signatures for the Devourers to adapt to and relied purely on mass and velocity to cause damage. The results were even more devastating than the initial energy weapon attacks. Devourer ships that had been adapting to resist plasma and torpedo damage simply disintegrated when struck by relativistic projectiles. The biomechanical hulls had no defense against pure kinetic energy, and ship after ship was reduced to expanding clouds of debris by the tungsten rounds. Outstanding results with kinetic weapons, Blake reported to Admiral Parker. The enemy adaptive armor appears to have no countermeasures for solid projectiles at these velocities. However, the Devourers proved that they had more tricks available than simple hull adaptation. As the human kinetic attack continued, the biomechanical ships began combining with each other to form larger composite entities. Multiple smaller vessels would merge their hulls together, creating massive hybrid ships that could regenerate damage at an alarming rate. Admiral, we are seeing something completely unprecedented, Captain Rodriguez reported from her concealed observation position. The Devourer ships are physically merging together to create larger targets that can absorb more damage. Some of these composite vessels are now over 30 kilometers in length. The merged Devourer ships also release swarms of fighter-sized organisms that move through space like living creatures but struck with mechanical precision. These biofighters were small enough to avoid most human weapons but numerous enough to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer volume of attacks. We have incoming biofighters closing on all our ships, Blake announced as his tactical display showed hundreds of small contacts approaching the human fleet. All vessels engage point defense systems and prepare for close combat. The space around the human ships erupted in defensive fire as every available weapon system engaged the approaching swarm. Laser point defense turrets and rapid-fire projectile weapons created a lethal barrier around each vessel, but the biofighters kept coming with the relentless determination of a hive mind species. Several of the biofighters managed to penetrate human defenses and attach themselves to ship hulls like mechanical parasites. They began cutting through armor plating with some kind of molecular disassembly beam that could breach even the heaviest protection given enough time. We have hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, reported the damage control officer aboard UES Lightning Strike. The biofighters are attempting to establish boarding points for larger enemy forces. This was exactly the scenario that Colonel Walsh and his orbital drop Marines had trained for during their preparation for the mission. The Marines were equipped with powered armor that allowed them to fight in vacuum, and their weapons were specifically designed for close-quarters combat in zero-gravity environments. Marine units deploy immediately to repel boarders, Walsh commanded as his troops moved to intercept the alien invaders. Remember, these things are part biological, so aim for whatever looks like it might be vital organs or control systems. The Marines fought their way through the corridors of the human ships, engaging biomechanical creatures that were unlike anything they had encountered in training. The devourer boarding organisms were roughly humanoid but covered in metallic carapaces, with multiple arms that ended in cutting tools or weapons. "These things are tough, but they do bleed," reported Sergeant Pete Collins over the communications network as his squad cleared a boarding pod from the UES lightning strike. "Standard ammunition is effective, but it takes multiple hits to put them down permanently." The close-quarters combat throughout the human fleet was brutal and chaotic as Marines fought to prevent the devourers from gaining control of critical ship systems. The powered armor gave the humans significant advantages in mobility and protection, but the alien boarders had superior numbers and seemed to feel no fear or pain. Marine Squads 7 and 9 have successfully cleared their assigned sections, Walsh reported to Admiral Parker. "We are maintaining control of all vital ship systems, but casualties are mounting rapidly." As the battle continued, Admiral Parker realized that the conventional tactics were not going to be sufficient against such an adaptable enemy. The Devourers had countered every human advantage so far and were beginning to gain the upper hand through sheer persistence and numerical superiority. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker. We are implementing Emergency Protocol 7 immediately. Dr. Carter, your quantum analysis of captured biomatter is now our highest priority. We need to find a weakness in their hive mind system before they adapt to everything we can throw at them." The battle raged for 18 brutal hours as human ships fought against an enemy that seemed to have an answer for every weapon and tactic they employed. Admiral Parker watched from the bridge of UES Thunder as his fleet traded devastating blows with the Devourer swarm while both sides adapted and evolved their strategies in real time. Dr. Helen Carter worked frantically in her laboratory analyzing samples of biomechanical material that the Marines had recovered from destroyed boarding organisms. Her equipment hummed with power as she subjected the alien tissue to every type of scan and analysis that human science could perform. The fate of the entire fleet might depend on what she could discover about Devourer biology. "Admiral, I am detecting some kind of quantum resonance pattern in the biomechanical tissue. Every sample shows the same frequency signature, which suggests a centralized control mechanism for the entire hive mind." Carter's discovery represented the breakthrough that Parker had been hoping for since the battle began. If the Devourers used a quantum frequency to coordinate their hive mind, then disrupting that frequency might cripple their ability to function as a unified force. "Doctor, can we generate interference on that frequency using our existing communication equipment?" "Yes, sir, but we would need to coordinate the transmission across multiple ships to generate enough power to affect the entire enemy fleet. Every vessel would need to focus their quantum communication arrays on the same frequency band simultaneously." Parker immediately began coordinating with his ship captains to implement the quantum disruption plan. The timing would be critical because the human fleet was running low on ammunition and several ships had taken significant damage from the prolonged battle. They would only get one chance to use this new weapon effectively. Captain Blake reported that UES Vengeance had lost 2 of its main weapon turrets and was operating on emergency power after taking direct hits from a merged Devourer ship over 20 kilometers long. The enemy vessel had absorbed dozens of kinetic projectiles and continued fighting even with massive sections of its hull blown away. "Sir, we cannot maintain this level of combat intensity much longer. Several ships are reporting critical ammunition shortages, and the enemy seems to be adapting faster than we can develop new countermeasures." Captain Rodriguez confirmed that the Devourer fleet was indeed becoming more effective as the battle continued. Her stealth ship remained hidden, but she could observe how quickly the biomechanical vessels learned to counter each new human tactic that was employed against them. "Admiral, the enemy is now using coordinated swarm attacks that completely overwhelm our point defense systems. They have also developed some kind of energy drain weapon that can disable our shields temporarily during attacks. Parker knew that the quantum disruption weapon represented their last realistic chance of victory. If Dr. Carter's theory was wrong, or if the frequency jamming failed to work, then the human fleet would be forced to retreat and abandon the Zilani to their fate. All ships prepare for coordinated quantum scrambler deployment on my command. Focus all communication arrays on frequency band Theta 7 and prepare for full spectrum jamming. This is our final gambit, so make it count. The human fleet executed the quantum disruption attack with precision that demonstrated their months of training and preparation. Every ship in the battle group focused their most powerful transmission equipment on the specific frequency that Dr. Carter had identified as the Devourer hive mind control signal. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the biomechanical. Enemy forces. Cut off from their centralized coordination system, the Devourer ships began behaving erratically as individual units, lost contact with the controlling intelligence. Some vessels stopped moving entirely while others began attacking their own allies in apparent confusion. Direct hit on the hive mind frequency. Carter reported with excitement as her instruments showed the disruption spreading throughout the enemy fleet. The quantum jamming is cascading through their entire communication network and causing systematic failures across all Devourer vessels. Within hours of the jamming attack beginning, the massive enemy swarm had been reduced to drifting hulks and scattered debris fields. Ships that had seemed unstoppable just moments before now floated helplessly as their crews or controlling intelligences struggled to function without their hive mind connection. High Navigator, Silas of the Zilani, transmitted from his hiding place in the asteroid field with amazement and gratitude that transcended the barriers between species. His message was filled with emotion as he tried to comprehend what the humans had accomplished. In 3 cycles of our world, the Devourers destroyed everything we had built over thousands of years. You defeated them in less than 1 solar rotation. How is this possible for any species to achieve? Captain Blake answered the question while nursing injuries he had sustained when his ship took direct hits during the final phase of combat. His response captured the essence of what made humanity different from the civilized species that had rejected them. We come from a world that has been trying to kill us for millions of years, High Navigator. Every day on Earth something tries to eat us, poison us, burn us, freeze us, or crush us under gravity that would disable most other species. We have learned to be very good at killing back when something threatens us or those we choose to protect. The aftermath of the battle brought revelations that would change the political structure of the galaxy forever. The Zilani offered humanity something that the Galactic Council had denied them, which was a place among the stars as equals rather than primitive outsiders. More importantly, word of the human victory spread rapidly throughout civilized space. Admiral Parker stood on the observation deck of UES Thunder watching Zilani ships emerge from their hiding places to begin the long process of rebuilding their civilization. The elegant alien vessels moved with grace through the debris fields that had once been Devourer ships as they began salvage operations to recover what they could from the battle. His communication officer approached with a data pad containing new messages that had been received from across the galaxy. The content was both exciting and daunting as Parker realized the full implications of what humanity had accomplished in the Kepler 442 system. Sir, we are receiving calls for assistance from 17 different star systems. Apparently there are other threats active in various sectors, and every species that heard about our victory here wants to request human military intervention. Parker looked out at the stars that surrounded them and considered the future that was opening up for humanity. They had proven that the most dangerous species in the galaxy could also be exactly what the universe needed when innocent civilizations faced extinction. Well then, I guess we had better get to work. After all, when someone sends an SOS, humans answer the call regardless of how far we have to travel or how dangerous the enemy might be. The human fleet prepared for departure from Kepler 442, carrying with them more than just the gratitude of the Zilani. They had announced humanity's presence on the galactic stage and proven that sometimes the qualities that made a species seem primitive and violent were exactly what was needed to protect the innocent from true evil. As the ships engaged their quantum drives for the journey home, a new chapter in galactic history began with Earth at its center.